Welcome to the Social Spitball Show with your host, Bram Sarkowski. This is your forum to discuss politics, religion, democracy, and sometimes even music, sports, and culture. Please join Bram and your co-host, Barbara D. Let's get the conversation going.
All right, the first of our guests this evening is Dr. David Alameel, who is running for the U.S. Senate out of Texas. He's running to replace John Cornyn, who is the incumbent. And he's on the line right now. Dr. Alameel, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Bram. Happy to be there with you and Barbara.
And we're honored to have you. Thank you for coming on the show. I always like to start out getting our guests to give a little bit about their background, and where they're coming from, and what sort of got them to run in the race. Would you mind sharing that with us?
Yes, I'm an immigrant. I'm also a U.S. veteran. I served in the U.S. Army for 3 years. I came here in 1972 when I was 20 years old with $120 in my pocket. I worked in gas stations and in the fields picking strawberries as a farm worker. I used my GI Bill to go to UT Health Science Center, became a dentist, and I moved to Dallas where we started a little business in the predominantly Latino community. And over the next 30 years, we worked very hard and expanded. We sold the business about 5 years ago. It had already 26 huge locations all over North Texas. And I became, a financial trader for my own family. I'm very knowledgeable about business, creating jobs, how the economy works, how the fiscal and monetary policy works. And we're very involved in our community. We have a family foundation. And I decided to run for office because I see that the kind of opportunities that I had when I was starting out are no longer within reach of the average American family. I see the education being so expensive, nobody can get out of poverty. And even if they went to college, there's no economy to absorb them and give them the careers that they deserve. And on top of that, they have debt that is a burden that would be on their shoulders for the next 10 to 15 years. So things have changed in America.
Right. Wow. Yeah, that's actually a really awesome reason to run. There are a lot of people who are struggling, and what better to have a perspective like that to represent the folks. And I will, before I moved on, because you did hit on something I wanted to talk about next, but I also wanted to mention that Wendy Davis, who is running for governor, she endorsed you in the primary, which was actually a crowded primary. Is that correct?
Yes, I have known Wendy for many, many, many years.
Great.
And I supported her early on in her career because she showed passion for my belief that education is at the heart of the American dream, and I think she'll do a good job.
Awesome. Yes, yeah, I think so too. I think Barbara agrees as well.
And I think
do. I think it would be great to have you as senator and her as governor. I think Texas needs that. So that being said, you did touch on something, creating jobs in this economy. You mentioned a lot of the things that have gone wrong that make it harder for folks to get ahead to achieve the American dream like you did. What could you do as a senator starting next January to help improve this economy and create jobs? And would you support the passage of the American Jobs Act?
Well, first, I want the viewers to know that global economy and our economy and finance doesn't happen in a vacuum. It doesn't happen by accident. We have an establishment in Washington that is actually a bipartisan establishment that takes most of their marching orders from Wall Street. They got addicted to the re-election money that Wall Street has. They spend about $9 billion a year on both parties' politicians. There is a group called Wall Street Democrats who actually help Republicans carry out and carry the water for Wall Street. And they passed special legislation that allowed corporations to take their factories overseas. So they gave them tax incentive to do that. They also gave them unfair trade agreements and allowed them to do the kind of things that makes it almost impossible for them to want to be here. For instance, you hear about how Burger King is changing the address by merging with another company. But for the last 30 years, almost every corporation on Wall Street have been using P.O. boxes in Cayman Island. So they claim that they are actually not an American company on paper, so they don't pay any U.S. taxes. They also allowed them to kind of offshore their profit by creating subsidiaries in Cayman Island where they produce a product for $5 in China. They sell it to their subsidiary for $95 in Cayman Island, and the subsidiary sell it to us here for $100, and they say they only made $5 profit. So when you count all these incentives that Washington gave them through re-election money bribery, so to speak, you realize this doesn't happen by accident. And my platform is about joining good senators like Senator Sherrod Brown of Ohio. My favorite also is Senator Elizabeth Warren from Massachusetts, who are fighting for us also against these corrupt practices. And I think that it can be reversed. If we remove these anti-American outsourcing incentives, those jobs will come back. And meanwhile, we need to ask them to pay taxes, by the way, on these trillions of dollars that they're hiding in offshore accounts. The taxes on those trillions of dollars belong to the American people. You and I don't get bailouts. You and I don't get to hide our profits overseas. We pay our taxes along with small businesses, and I don't see why corporations should have this privilege just because they give a lot of money to our politicians in Washington.
Absolutely. Now, part of the problem is that our industrial base has gone away. We obviously saved the Detroit and the American auto industry, but you mentioned something that is important is those profits in offshore accounts like the Cayman Islands and so forth and so on. How is that fixable? Is that fixable through reforming the tax code? Is it going to take a huge overhaul?
That is what I was trying to explain, is that when you give incentive to any corporation to make more profit overseas than make profit here, and when I say make profit, they're going to make the same profit regardless, but the profit that they claim they have made is different. So when you give them incentive to say, I can hide my profit overseas, we can pass a law to make any profit overseas non-taxable, then they have the incentive to go overseas and claim through subsidiaries that they do not make any profit, but their profit is hidden in the subsidiaries in overseas. And also, we allow them to remain American, so to speak, but on paper, they claim they're not American. So this Burger King today is the tip of the iceberg. Most corporations on Wall Street, in fact, almost all of them on Wall Street, have P.O. boxes in Cayman Island, and they claim that's their domicile. But in public, they keep telling our people that they are American company. And all these corporations make most of their profit right here in the United States. So if you want to be an American company, if you want to make profit right here in the United States, then you should say whether you're American or not, and you should pay your fair share in taxes on these profits that you are hiding overseas. If you remove that incentive, they will have no reason to be overseas. It's not cheap labor like they tell you. That's just one of the factors. The biggest factor is that they don't have to show any of their profit on the books here for the IRS. And this happened not by accident. It happened because the establishment in Washington over the last 30 years passed legislation to help them do this. And once the people know that, then they know that it's fixable through our government. And people need to realize that they can't trust the establishment. They need to vote for people that want to bring change. And to me, John Cornyn is one of the leaders of this corrupt establishment in Washington that outsource our jobs, dodge their taxes, and left our country broke and without hope for most of the working families.
You're absolutely right. I totally agree. And John Cornyn is one of the worst offenders, and that's why we are glad you're running. And speaking of we, got Barbara on the line, and she's got some questions for you related to those Washington insiders and corporate profits.
All right.
Yes, Dr. Alameel. Assuming we get corporate profits back in domestic accounts, what can be done to ensure big corporations pay their fair share of taxes? Like you just said, Burger King is planning to go to Canada, which I think is interesting. But anyway, would that be like, would you have tax reform? exactly what would you do?
Well, definitely it's all done through the tax code, but also it's done through free trade agreements. Most people don't realize that over the last 35 years, we have signed multiple trade agreements that were negotiated in secret. And these were negotiated between us and other countries, but in reality, the people who negotiate on behalf of China behind the scene is actually Wall Street, because the factories in China are actually Wall Street factories. And when China is allowed to rig their currency against the U.S. dollar for about 30 to 35%, then Wall Street factories in China have an edge of 35%. When they allow them to produce products over there and hide the profit in Cayman Island subsidiary, that gives them an edge of 35% on their taxes, plus the fact that they hide their profit. It's a 35% of a much bigger profit than they actually claim. So if you remove the outsourcing tax incentive, if you remove the flaws in our free trade agreements, then all the jobs will come back on their own back to this country. For instance, NAFTA was a big flawed agreement with Mexico. It was supposed to help Mexico build its middle class so they can buy our product and produce prosperity in both countries. Instead, they had loopholes in it negotiated by Wall Street corporations to allow China to bring product through Mexico. They have two big Pacific ports in Mexico, and a lot of the product that come through Mexico is actually Chinese product that they ship to Mexico, and it comes to the United States as product of NAFTA. But this is part of the secrecy of why they create these flawed trade agreements. And unfortunately, Bill Clinton, who's a Democrat, pushed for NAFTA, and we all heard Ross Perot and everybody else said, this is a flawed agreement. You're going to hear a whoosh of gushing sound of our jobs going overseas.
That's right.
The same thing now, they're negotiating the Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement. It's going to do the same thing. We have all of our trade agreements that started when Reagan came, that bankrupted, remember the U.S. Steel when they were dumping steel from Japan in our country, and all the steel corporation went bankrupt. Then Japan started dumping cars, and Detroit started suffering. And then China came along, and they were dumping everything under the book. If you go to any store and you flip a product, it will say made in China. So we have nothing left for us to produce because the economic formula has changed. And yes, the tax code and the free trade agreement are at the heart of the outsourcing of our job. And the only reason the jobs have been outsourced so Wall Street can get not only cheap labor, but they can hide how much profit they're making, and what profit they do make, they also get breaks on it so they don't have to pay taxes. It's all about incentives. It's not that we cannot compete. Do you think that China, that had 1.5 billion Chinese rice farmers, suddenly in 30 years they can take over the world manufacturing if it wasn't for Wall Street know-how and expertise and money? So we have an establishment that's anti-American, tax dodging, and they could care less, and they have an establishment in Washington that do whatever they want to do. If you go to Washington today, they tell you as a senator or as a congressman, you're going to sit here and you're going to spend 80% of your time on the phone asking people for money and leave the rest to us, the leaders. But in reality, the only places that they can get money to get reelected is from lobbyists who give them $500,000 per lunch or per dinner for the reelection. So nobody gives a darn about us in Washington, and I don't think, yes, Democratic Party is better than Republican Party. Most of the Republican Party, they say publicly, we don't care about working people, we care about Wall Street. But it's a shame when you see a lot of Democrats saying how they want to look like a duck, and talk like a duck, but they don't walk like a duck. They're not really walking like Democrats. They're carrying Wall Street agenda in their purse, and I think people ought to know that.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, a very good point. And I think the problem that we find is the average person that goes to vote doesn't have a clue. I think that's the sad part.
Well, I tell people that they should tell John Cornyn and every other Republican and Wall Street Democrat that if they if they love their Wall Street factories in China so much, then they should move with their bosses over there, the Wall Street bosses. They should move to China and leave us alone to rebuild our own country, our own economy for the benefit of the people of these United States of America. Otherwise, they're not our leaders. They're not American.
That's right.
Oh, I think that's very, very true. Very, very true. Let me ask you about extending the deadline to ratify the ERA, ensuring equal pay for equal work, and many, many other things. What's going on in Texas with that? Is Texas one of the states who passed it, or is Texas one of the states that needs to step up and get it done, like North Carolina?
Well, unfortunately, in this 21st century, we still have to talk about the rights of people to earn the same money between women and men, the right to vote between minorities and non-minorities. These kind of equality issues, it's sad that we still have to convince people about the credibility and the necessity that there are certain things that God gives us the right to have. And I don't want my daughter, who does the same job at a company with probably more enthusiasm and more motivation, to be paid half of what the man next to her is getting paid. And I don't understand anybody or any politician who would disagree with that. But they spin this as being anti-business. Everything that is good for business, Republicans come around and say it's bad for business. This is not bad for business. It's good for business. And it's not fair that, for instance, Latino women have to get paid 49 cents on the dollar in Texas than do men doing the same job. And I'm a businessman. I spent all my life building business. And I can tell you, we used to take people straight out of high school, and we used to pay them $10 an hour just to learn. And on top of that, my clinics were 95% staffed by women and 95% managed by women. And we were a company that had 350 employees, $50 million a year revenue. And I couldn't understand for the life of me, how could I be successful if I without looking at women and men in absolutely the same lens. And it was the women in my company, and 95%, like I said, of them were women, who built my success, who built my company with me. And we used to pay them on a scale that had nothing to do with race or age or size or gender, because that was good for business. So how does treating people without looking at these factors, but only looking at the way that they dedicate themselves to their job, why would they look at anything else? So it's baffling to me that people still fight over this.
Very
but they
true.
do, because Republicans always spin these nonsense economic theories that anybody who had business for like me for 30 years would know that this is a lie.
Yeah,
There's nothing
exactly.
better than happy employee. I tell you, in my company, we used to tell our employees, it's not the customer that's number one. It's the employees. If the employees are happy, all customers are happy.
Very nice.
Yeah, I feel that way, too. I've done some management, and I worked always, I'm retired now, but I worked very, very hard to make sure that everybody was included and that people got the education. If they wanted to move up, that they could. And
That's
at
right.
the nursing home, at the nursing home, I had zero turnover for 2.5 years in my employees. So.
Yeah, people don't actually take turnover into their argument, but that's a very good point. If you want to have less turnover, you take care of your employees, and that's a big cost that you cut down. And there are companies like Whole Foods and the Container Store who are preaching the same concept, and they say, just like I did, that's why they were very successful. But, in this day and age, you still have to tell people about equal pay for equal work. I mean, people who argue with that are dinosaurs.
Right, exactly. or that comment that was made the other day that some women don't want to make more than their husband. That wouldn't be good for the marriage. It's like, what? I hardly think.
You just said it. You just proved my point. They're dinosaurs. Only a dinosaur would say that.
Exactly right.
And
or a
dinosaurs
controlling
are extinct.
person. Yeah.
If a man self-esteem is based on whether or not he makes more money than his wife or his wife makes more than him, there's something wrong with that man.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Issues in Texas. Do you support Roe versus Wade? I know one of my favorite people, and when I need inspiration, I will watch Sarah Sloman and her telling the legislature in Texas just how she felt, and I know you know who I mean.
Yeah. Well,
I was like,
let me
if I need
explain
a pop-up, I put
very
that on
clearly
and
where
say,
I
yes.
stand on that. You know, I'm Catholic and my wife is Catholic, and we always tell people, in our family, we don't believe in abortion, but that's why we have the belief that Democrats are not for abortion. People believe that nonsense. Democrats are about saying, like I do, I don't want to go to my neighbor when they're discussing this and tell them what to do. I don't want them to come to my living room and tell us what to do. We, as Catholics, make our choice, and we made it. But we respect other women and other families to make their own choices based on whatever circumstance and beliefs that they have. And that's what Democrats are all about.
Yeah.
Right, exactly, yeah, because it is a very personal choice. And it's a difficult choice for anyone that might have to make it.
Yes, and I tell you this, I wish our society have more education for our people and our youth to learn that they should avoid pregnancy at any cost until they're ready to build a family, and be able to cut down on abortion until we have no abortion. And those who are pregnant, I wish that they have the opportunity and the means to accept that pregnancy, and because they have opportunity to take care of those unborn children and be able to, take care of them while still being able to take care of their own life. And that is very difficult today. I'm not justifying. I'm just saying that there are ways for us to cut down on abortion by cutting down on pregnancies. And education and availability for women to have, the kind of access to health care that allow them to not get pregnant is a way to cut down on abortion, because I don't believe in it. But I think that, anybody who end up having to make that difficult choice, they should have alternatives that are viable to them, not that we think it's viable to them, that they believe it's viable to them, so they make the right choices. And the best right choice is not to get pregnant in the first place by having access to contraception and things like this. Women need more access to health care so they can take care of themselves and not, become pregnant with unwanted pregnancy, so to speak. I wish everybody had the ability and the resources and support around them to accept the pregnancy that they have, but it's much better to also, when all is said and done, that education about how to avoid pregnancy and having access to contraception so they can avoid pregnancy would go a long way to helping that, because poor people even have problem affording access to health care, and that's a big problem. Right.
It goes back to expanding our Medicaid and our Medicare so that people can get better health care.
Well, yes, and I'm glad you mentioned that. We have a governor who is more than happy to engage in the worst kind of cronyism, but he has the audacity to refuse $90 billion that would have helped us in expanding the access to our health care and especially Medicaid thing. I wish that we can also change Texas government in Austin so that we could have people like Wendy Davis and Leticia Van de Putte, so we can tell people, look, this $90 billion is not a gift from Washington. This is our own money that we are reclaiming from Washington. And if you don't take it, they will give your money to other states. But you paid that money. We paid it as Texans out of our income tax. So we want to give it to other people because Rick Perry thinks that we don't want money from Washington. It's not money from Washington. It's our money that he's giving to other states. And we could have had $90 billion to help every Texan have more Medicaid because it's their own tax money.
And it would have helped your economy too, going back to what we first started talking about.
Oh, definitely. $90 billion for a state like Texas, that's a big boost in our economy. Yes, definitely. Heck, you can buy one of those small countries with $90 billion.
Really?
Right.
Exactly. Education. I actually have some educators in my family, and my sister-in-law recently retired from the Arlington School District, which is, if you're still in Dallas, is just around the corner from you. And I have a nephew that also teaches in, I believe he's in the Arlington School District. He's in that area because that's where they live. What can be done to make a stronger education system? Because, as you said, having a better education is the key to moving the society up.
Actually, it's the only equalizer in the world is education. And there were times when I was going to school in the mid 70s and early 80s when I was going to UT Health Science Center, my college education was practically free. I would not be able to go to school today if the education was as it is today. I was paying $110 a semester at San Antonio College while I was in the military. And back then in the dental school, I remember it was like $2,500 or $3,000 a semester. In a year, it was like $4,000. Today, it's like $50,000 to $60,000, if not $75,000. So it's back to where only the privileged few can afford that, and if you're not privileged, then you're barely middle class, and then you take debt. Well, you get out of dental school or medical school with $300,000 in debt. What's a student from the African American community or the Latino community or the Asian community or any other person who is not living behind a gated community is going to do? If you live in the colonial, if you live in a poor neighborhood, how in the world are you going to be better off than your parents, and how are your children going to be better off than you? Right. The whole idea behind the American dream was that we had upward mobility where every 10, 15 years you're better off. When you retire, you're much better off. And every generation was better than the previous generation. That's the American dream, and it was done through public education. All that is gone, and the economy is gone. Our government is bankrupt because trillions of dollars are not getting paid taxes on. They're hiding in offshore accounts, and our country is left broke and without opportunity. And education is at the heart of that. And I don't care what people will tell you. If you look at every other country that is today successful in the global economy, that has a strong industrial base, they will tell you that they have an education system that offers a first-class education to every child in that country. And that's why they can compete with the best of the best. That's why the best in their country can rise and lead their economy, and the best in their country can rise and be the leader of their country. That is the foundation of a great nation, and we are supposed to be the best of the best in the country. We created the whole 20th century global economy, and now we have nothing to speak of except the top 0.1% are controlling everything in our lives, in our democracy, our industry, our states, our political system. Yeah. And people need to realize that. They need to get upset enough to get out and kick these rascals out of office and get education for their children.
That's right. I mean, I'm looking at a sticker right here from boldprogressives.org. It says if the 99% vote, the 1% won't matter, and that's exactly what you just said. If people are educated, if they're informed as voters, and they get out and vote, then the 1% are their power is taken away. Because you're absolutely right. Education is the equalizer, and vote is the expression of that education. And Dr. Alameel, we have a couple more minutes left. I know you're a busy man. You have to get going to do some other things. So I just want to ask you one quick question. Well, it's not really a quick, I guess, as quick as you can make it for yourself. But I wanted to ask you about comprehensive immigration reform and the American Dream Act. Where do you stand on that topic?
Well, obviously, I'm an immigrant. I think immigrants make our country strong. My wife's family is from Zacatecas, Mexico. But I recognize that we have a division in this country. I think the reason we don't have immigration reform is because both sides like this to be a political football in every election. The best way to fix this is, yes, we need a secure border. But yes, this is a country of immigrants. We have 11 million undocumented people here. I see an immigration reform that goes hand in hand with securing our border. So when we take care of the people who are here, who need immigration reform, we don't have to go back to this in 10 years and 20 years and 30 years constantly. Every 15, 20 years, we have to call for immigration reform.
Right.
I don't know how long you have to be in this country to qualify to get to stay here, but I know that these 11 million people, most of them, the majority of them, have been here for many, many years. They have children, they have grandchildren, and they have been law-abiding, hardworking. For some of those people, I think, that have been here for that long, they need a path to citizenship. The dreamers need to stay here. And those who haven't been here that long, you know what? We can find them a way to apply for work, and they can renew that permit every so often. And as long as we have need, they should be able to stay without having to live in the shadows. And we can sit around the table and argue how many years they have to be here or so forth. But at least we have to sit on the table and agree that both securing the border, because we have this drug cartel that, and the violence on the border. I've visited a lot of these communities. I know that. And also because people will say, if you want a credibility for immigration reform, then give me a solution that doesn't bring us right back to where we started in 10 to 20 years. And I think this is a reasonable solution. You secure the border, you cut down the violence, you keep people from just crossing from Peru and Argentina all the way to Mexico every year. But if we close the border, secure our trade, and then we take care of the people who are already here, and we decide who gets citizenship, who gets permanent status without citizenship, but it's permanent, like a permanent green card or something, and people who only get, a work permit. But that's a non-political solution that takes care of everybody. Otherwise, they're never going to pass this, and they're going to use it as a political pinata. I think the Latino community and every other immigrant in this country deserve a clear answer of where we're going to go, and we can't have 11 million people living in the shadows of our society.
What a wonderful answer, and I think it goes back to the economy too. They contribute to the economy, and it's also a humanistic approach too. I mean, they're human beings. We need to take care of them as human beings.
You bet.
If they're already here. So, Dr. Alameel, thank you again for the honor of appearing on our show. We would love to have you back anytime that you have the time to come on. But
okay. I thank you for this opportunity, and I want to thank Barbara also. It was a pleasure to be with you.
Yes,
it
sir.
was a pleasure talking to you.
But before you go, I know you need to go, but I just wanted you to be able to plug how folks can help you get out the vote, how they can contribute to your campaign, and volunteer for you.
Yes, I want the people to know that I need them to be able to win, but I also want them to know you get the government that you vote for, and if you don't vote, somebody else will vote to give you the government that they want. So if you care about yourself, if you care about your children, please vote for them. I don't care who you vote for as long as you vote what you really want for this country. It's time to put our country first and tell these rascals that business as usual is over.
Well, Dr. Alameel, thank you again for being on the show. God bless you on your journey as you go to win the seat, and we hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Bye, Barbara.
Bye-bye.